Tonight, prepare yourself for a trip down the rabbit hole. From the mind of USA Today bestselling author Chuck Tingle, the man who turned absurdity into art, comes his newest novel of terror, Lucky Day. Meet Vera, a survivor of a global catastrophe known only as the low probability event. Once a brilliant professor of statistics, now a woman lost in meaning. But when a problematic government agent named Layne shows up at her door, things take a turn for the bizarre. Deadly waves of absurdity ripple out from an improbably lucky casino in Vegas, threatening the world as we know it. In Lucky Day, Chuck Tingle proves the only thing more terrifying than serious horror is serious horror with a twist of absurdity. So hold tight as Howard Gorman sits down with Chuck to unravel this wild, wicked tale of luck, logic, and looming disaster.
Hello.
Hello, Chuck Tingle. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. How are you? Oh, look at this stack. I like the book stack.
I had to put you on the top, of course. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time. I mean, I love these books that I've got. I mean, I've got them right at the top here. I love them. So thank you so much for your time, first of all.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
So again, thank you so much for the book. I've just finished. Well, I'm just about finishing the second time through. So I mean, I've loved.
Oh my gosh! Oh wow! Thank you.
Because I read it when I first got sent the ARC, and I got sent it quite a few months ago. So I just kind of had to refresh my memory. I've loved it the second time through just as much, if not more. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's just telling the truth. So I mean, first of all, I wanted. Also, congratulations on the Venus Award. Before I even talk about anything else, yeah, because I know you just
the Locus Award.
Sorry, I wrote it down on Venus. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Honestly, that's a parallel word. There's a lot of words out there that are like completely different. Then you start to realize that actually culturally I feel like that's a very similar one.
But no, congrats. I mean, that must have been a huge buzz for you, no?
Yeah, it was good. It was wonderful. I mean, I don't pay too much attention to award type stuff. I probably should because it's fun. I think there's like a sort of cynical thing like, oh, I'm not supposed to care or anything. I think the reason that I don't pay attention is not like a cynical, I'm better than awards kind of thing. It's more like I just have so much going on. I'm like constantly writing. I mean, this, interview, we're probably going to talk mostly about my horror novels. I'm still self-publishing, I would say, magical, realist, surreal erotica. And so I write like all the dang time. And then suddenly I start seeing updates. Oh, you won an award. And I think, oh my gosh, wow. Okay. Got to refocus my brain for a minute here.
I mean, that was going to be one of my later questions. Yeah, I mean, you're just so prolific. I've not actually read any of these. You call them Tinglers now. These other books that you write, these stories.
Yes.
I've not actually read those, but that's something I want to talk to you about a little bit later on, just to see if you can.
Sure.
It's not because I'm more of a horror reader, but because I've loved these books so much of yours, I'm pretty sure that these are probably something that I'd appreciate as well. So I'll ask you a little bit about that later on. If that's okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. So I mean, the first thing I want to talk to you about is obviously Camp Damascus, for example. Tackle specific social themes, political themes, religious extremism, diversity, those kind of things. And then Bury Your Gaze in a similar way, identity, algorithmic art, capitalism. And then this one is more kind of fate, order, chaos, existential dread. They're all very kind of specific themes and kind of commentaries that you want to talk about in each book. I'm quite curious, what comes first? The themes that you want to talk about specifically, or the story first, and then which one blends into the other one afterwards?
Oh, that's a great question. So actually, my process specifically for writing like the horror novels, because a novel it's a big commitment. When I'm writing my shorts, I can write about whatever I want. I write them in 24 hours. They come out the next day. A horror novel, that's, I'm going to write it. It's going to take a while. It's going to be a year before it comes out. So big commitment. And you want to make sure that it's resonating, that it's something worth sitting down to write. I have heard horror stories, real life horror stories from authors that I know about, you get 80% of the way done with your book and you realize, I don't really like this. That is just, I cannot fathom the terror I should write my next book about that, actually.
Yeah.
So I try my best to avoid that. And the way that I do it and my process is I try to take a walk every day. I do a little trot up the hill near my house, and that's about an hour. And what I do during that time is I kind of think of ideas, I digest my thoughts, and I would say in my mind, two buckets. One of those buckets is like high concept ideas that's just like, oh, that's a kind of a clever, that's just a clever general horror idea, something that I noticed, anything like that. That's the one bucket. And then the other bucket is kind of like things that I care about that are more current, like emotions bubbling up within me, something that I'm really focused on that I have something to say about. And as I do my walk, I look at these as kind of like bouncing around, right? In the buckets. And eventually these two things will crash into each other. And I'll suddenly, it's like a light bulb where I think, oh, this concept that I've been working, like sitting there that I love, that is absolutely the best way for me to give this message over here. So the two of them will like crash together in this sort of like perfect harmony of, okay, now we've made a cocktail, right? Now we have peanut butter and chocolate here swirling together. And the second that that happens, that's the second that I know, okay, this is going to be worth, the 6 months or whatever that I'm going to take to like sit down and plot this out and write it. So it's actually both at the same time. And then the real spark is the crash. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the perfect way to tell that.
So you don't actually come up with an ending or a beginning. It just, this kind of this big bang.
Well,
almost.
I mean, the Big
book.
Bang, the Big Bang starts before the beginning, and then I start working out like, how am I going to do it? So like, I said high concept before. A lot of buckaroos use the term high concept incorrectly. Funny enough, they think of it as like a flighty sort of like artsy whatever. Yeah. High concept is actually the opposite of that, at least in film, which is literally a film that you can sell without an actor attached. And it's essentially like the idea is so top of the line that you could just make it based on the idea. The perfect example is like people talk about Liar Liar being a lawyer who can only tell the truth for a day. Right? Like you don't really need to cast that or anything. You're just suddenly like, okay, I know the comedy, I know the situations, whatever. So horror, funny enough, I think maybe because a lot of folks associate me with comedy, I think horror functions in a similar high concept way, or the horror that I like, where it could almost be the punchline for a joke, or it could be like a little thing. I don't want to give away too much because I have so much mystery, but Camp Damascus has been around for long enough that I can say like the high concept idea of that would be, what if there was a church that was doing basically like reverse exorcisms instead of removing the demons to create the effect that they want. They're putting demons on to create the effect that they want, right? Like that's a very just high concept idea. I say that in one sentence, you can say whatever. So I have so many of those in my head. And then eventually when that crash happens, then I start to go, okay, well, what's the plot of this? And I start beating it out. And funny enough, the way I just talked about high concept is in film terms. I beat them out with film beats, which is another thing that I think makes my writing unusual. I think people tend to think of my writing as very cinematic and also very fast paced, because while most novelists are doing like novel beats where you can kind of like go over here for 10,000 words, zoom over here. When I make my story beats, they are to a very specific method that is screenwriting. So they are all beat out as if you're watching like a 2-hour movie. So that I think gives it a kind of a unique tone for novels, actually.
No, definitely, yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't want to give away any of the plot of this story at all, because I went in blind, and I'm so glad that I did. Even so, the second time around, it was just as good, I said. But I'm quite curious. Can you pitch this story? Because I don't want to ask any questions. I don't want to overstep the mark. So can you pitch the story for people who haven't read it, just to kind of why they should read it? Because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to overstep the mark. I want you to kind of explain what you want people to know going in without spoiling anything for them.
I'll give my pseudo high concept summary. The story is essentially, and this happens within the first few chapters. It's funny. This one's kind of easier to talk about because like there's a big hook in the first two chapters, so I feel like I can talk about it.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, a world where in a single day, in a single moment, actually, incredibly bad luck happens, killing 8 million approximately people all across the globe in very unusual ways. And then the fallout of that, there is a character who's a professor of statistics who, existentially speaking, someone who is used to finding the patterns of the universe has a really hard time dealing with these unexplainable, seemingly unexplainable, but incredibly rare events that all happen at the same time. What are the chances? How do you then exist in a world that doesn't make sense? So ultimately, I think the philosophical question is exactly that. I think it's something we can all relate to. Like, how, in a world that seems increasingly to have no fairness or to not make any sense, how do we find meaning in that, or how do we find like love in that? How do we motivate ourselves through that? How do we deal with it? So that's kind of the question. And then I do write queer horror, so I would say that the queer angle on it is it's also exploring bisexual erasure. It is exploring the idea of, as a bisexual myself, a really common refrain that has always been said is that bisexuals don't exist. Not only by queer people, but by cis straight people. Just this idea that like bisexuality is actually sort of this static thing between two sides instead of a thing. So I had this idea of, oh, what if I had a bisexual character kind of go head to head with nothingness to say, oh, you want to see something not exist? I'll show you non-existence is essentially what that is. So I think there's a big dollop of whatever that is in the greater story.
Mhm. No, I love the way that you mix that together. Obviously, I don't want to spoil it at all, but I love the way that you mixed this kind of the way that she feels a certain amount of erasure just before this happens, even, and it's her
Yes.
losing her faith and kind of doubting her own existence, no? And then the story helps her and helps the readers to kind of appreciate themselves and kind of find
Yeah.
existence through
So
that, no?
that's a very good example of what I was talking about the two buckets is like the idea of this like supernatural, like like luck as a force, and actually I can say because it's probably on the like a supernaturally lucky casino or these like a luck based horror thing. I've had that idea for a decade, maybe over a decade. It's been sitting in that bucket at the bottom of it. And then one morning I was having a lot of feelings that I was processing about like bisexual erasure and gatekeeping and stuff. And that was one of those moments where I thought, oh my gosh, that is the perfect vehicle to tell that and to talk about my feelings on that and to deliver a message on that is this idea that's been sitting in this bucket that I couldn't quite figure out. And the second those crashed together, like all the blank parts that are why it's been sitting there that you were like, what? I can't quite untangle this. When they crash together, it's like everything just straightens out and they all fill in each other's blanks. And then suddenly you have a complete story.
Mhm. Something I want. I mean, you said obviously that you're bisexual yourself, so you like to talk about these themes. I'm quite curious. This must be writing this kind of a book must be extremely cathartic, but at the same time, it must be extremely painful. I mean, there's certain things in there where you talk about everything we do, just kind of a different flavor of suffering, phrases like this. So I imagine that you go through. I mean, it must be very cathartic to get it off your chest and to speak out openly about it in a book. But at the same time, it must be very painful to kind of go back and imagine kind of things that you may have gone through yourself, feeling erasure. So can
Yeah.
you just walk me a little bit through that and how that
You
kind of lends
know,
into the story and how you get it off your chest and how cathartic and how painful and maybe painful first, then cathartic it serves for you.
sure. Yeah, I think that honestly, my I have a very unusual approach to horror. I think that there is obviously like I see horror is kind of a punk genre. I think that they're really intertwined actually because you are exploring things that are kind of unpleasant. Like people naturally don't want to be afraid, and dissonance in punk music is Biologically, it's unpleasant. It's the sound of an alarm clock is dissonant. That's why it wakes you up. Riding a roller coaster, eating really spicy food. There's kind of genres of art that are intentionally subjecting ourselves to unpleasant things. And as we do that over time, they become pleasant for us. Our body kind of rewires. It's kind of like working out, actually. It's like you break down your muscle and then it builds back a little stronger. So interestingly, I think all of those things generally have a really healthy, hearty relationship with anger, with frustration, with rage. But my approach is very different because I really write from a place of love. It is the fuel behind everything that I do. Even if it's like an anger, it is still kind of like I would say, ultimately fueled by love. And so approaching this one really not so cathartic, really fun, and well, it's still cathartic, not so painful, really fun. I tend to see horror actually as like kind of there's two functions there. There's like kind of grinding horror that's uncomfortable, like uncomfortable horror, and then there's cathartic horror. The grinding horror is the stuff that we go through, and we all know it. Like I'm a horror lover. It feels bad and it gets worse, and you come out and everyone loses, and you sit and you think that was made me feel really bad. Yeah, that was rough. And then you come back the next day, and I kind of think you approach it and realize, okay, I'm still alive. This is art. And that thing you just went through, while it might feel bad when you turn off the movie or close that final page, really potently powerful the next day when you look back on it, when you experience that, when you go through it. So there's a time and a place for that. I love some of those movies. I love some of those books. But what I write is the other 50%. And what I like is what I would call cathartic horror. Cathartic horror functions as essentially you get to like the second act, you're about to enter the third, and something happens. There's a twist where you realize, oh, this person has the upper hand. They're the person who all their friends were murdered is going to come back. They're going to save the day. They're going to conquer this. And it essentially works as this sort of like almost a revenge thing. Suddenly Laurie has the knife and not Michael Myers. There's like this kind of thing where now we're amped up because all these feelings, all this pressure is being released. Yeah. Both types of horror are completely valid. I love them both. And I kind of think you need both because you need the fear with cathartic horror that it might not be, that you might be hit with that terrible grind at the end. They kind of need each other to function. But what I like to write definitely is like the cathartic horror where you have that thing that at a certain point we are coming back and it's like full on pushing it. And I think to do that, I really need it to happen like the love of a situation more than the pain of it. And that's just for me. There's all kinds of ways to do it for different artists.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned also that you do like to write in a very cinematic style. And you said that you like to kind of create these high concept ideas that would work, if talking in kind of film talk, that would work with whichever actor you choose. So I'm quite curious, when you do write the books, because they are such high concept. I mean, it depends how you define kind of high concept. But for me, high concept is something that is kind of, it's out there, but at the same time believable and kind of contagious. It kind of pulls you in straight away. So it's kind of, it has to be high concept, but it has to at the same time be kind of simple and grounded for everyone to kind of to resonate, for it to resonate with people. So I'm quite curious, because your books are very high concept, but at the same time, I feel that they're very grounded and very authentic. And even though they are kind of very left field, some of the kind of the ideas and the concepts, a lot of the groundedness of the characters and certain parts of the narrative kind of really make it work so much better than maybe it wouldn't if it was just kind of such a really high concept idea. So I'm curious how you approach that.
I think that to kind of yes and what you're saying, really like a good high concept idea has kind of like a note, some would say of irony, but I look at it like a punchline, right? It really is, and I think that's why you're seeing so many buckaroos who were in comedy making really potent horror. You know, someone like Jordan Peele, you can go back and look at like uh any of his horror movies. You could actually, if you wanted to, you could take that concept and write it as a sketch on Key and Peele. And a lot of the sketches on Key and Peele, if you go back and look, they really are horror concepts, but they're just edited and acted in a way that plays them for laughs. Like Zach Krieger doing Barbarian and stuff. Like horror and comedy have this thing, one because it's timing, but I think the one that's really overlooked is that sort of high concept irony of the concepts themselves. And so I am also doing that. And I think the way to really pull that off, or at least what works for me, and this isn't even intentional, this is what I end up doing, despite my love of high concept, I tend to kind of like write things or imagine them in a very grounded way. Like, what if I took this really ridiculous, quote, ridiculous idea and put it in the real world and made everyone kind of react how I would, or how like outside of media would, which is generally kind of going to result in strange things, which is also comedy. You know, I think a lot of people find a lot of my books funny, and a lot of those moments within the horror of comedy are in people reacting to these really incredible high concept things the way that someone really would, which is kind of inherently funny. I mean, it's just, these are weird events. And a lot of the time, because of the tone of a horror movie, you think, oh, they would be really scared if this happens. And really, I do think that if you dropped a lot of these horrific concepts and stripped away all the scary music and just thought, what would it be to see this? A lot of your reactions would be pretty funny, because you just, it just would be strange, you know? So I think that's probably part of it.
Mm-hmm. Tommy, talking the high concept without digging too deep into this story, because I don't want to give it away again. Something that's always blown my mind is whenever I kind of think of the idea of nothingness, because in reality, at the beginning, nothing really had to exist. I mean, before we were all here, there had to be nothing, and I always
that freaks me out too.
It freaks me out because I just get into kind of a vicious circle. I just can't get out of it to kind of imagine why there are things, why things exist, why there's nothing, why there's no sound, and these are things that you dive into very deeply in this book. So I'm quite curious how you were able to kind of get this, which is a complete mind fuck. I mean, that's what it is. It's just a vicious circle. How you could get out of that circle to bring it into a book and to kind of create something that people could understand and enjoy at the same time as a story.
Yes. I think that nothingness is, authors or any creator kind of has their thing that they come back to, right? And so I always, like someone like H.P. Lovecraft obviously is like nothingness is the thing, right? Although he had some tendencies that made other things frightening, which is like the other to him and all this, and very problematic in many ways. But essentially, he dealt with a lot of nothingness. And like, what does that actually mean? For me personally, I think existentially, like that is my big fear. So I do think that it weaves its way through all of my work. Whether it's the horror, Bury Your Gaze has a character that's like one of the villains is like directly related to that sort of existential stuff. There's a character named Mrs. Y who is like, that is essentially her power is this existentialism in a really frightening way. But even my short form erotica, I have this like very dark force that weaves through all those books that is called The Void, that is just nothingness. So I think about it a lot. I feel like I can really work it in. I think the challenge for something like Lucky Day, and for any art, right, is you have nothingness. And then the question is, well, how do you express that? How do you Like, do you just leave it off the page? Speaking of H.P. Lovecraft, a lot of the time he would do that. That was his method, is it would just say something like, and the creature was so frightening that I can't even describe it. And then
Yeah.
he would kind of go on. That was his thing. And funny enough, it kind of works in fiction, right? I mean, there's a
Yeah,
reason why
and a
people
lot of
really like
movies they
his
do the
stuff.
same as well. They don't let you see
They
like
just
Jaws,
don't
for example.
show
You hardly
it.
don't see the shark. It's exactly the same. Yeah.
Exactly. So for Lucky Day, and what I like to do with it is to say, okay, I want to interact with it a little more, but how can you interact if you're leaving it off the page? And so what I like to do is give the characters um, something to interact with. It's kind of just like, I won't say it's not like as simple as like their deepest fear or their imagination. It is just saying, like, scientifically speaking, your brain must fill in the blanks because you just can't conceive of what it is. And so generally, because I'm writing first person present, it allows me to just say the character realizes that this is not inherently like real, but they are interacting with it because their brain just can't let them see what nothingness is, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I did with Lucky Day, and it was really fun actually because, then you get to explore like what are the different, what do all the different characters see? It's like in a video game, like you're all playing the same game, but you've laid a different skin over the top because we all have different brains. That's a really fun part of the book, I think.
No, I mean, obviously, it must be so fun, so much fun to play with these ideas, these concepts. But at the same time, I imagine you must have to kind of draw a level and say, right, we can't go any further than this because otherwise people are just not going to buy it. So how do you set that level for yourself?
Yes, I think it's book to book, right? Like depending on the tone. Um I think that if you do what I said initially, which is like you take these really far out ideas and try to react to them as realistically as possible, you can actually get away with a lot. But I would also say that a book like Lucky Day, you could in some ways sum it up to say that absurdity as a philosophical concept is the villain. It is the shark lurking under the water, is absurdity itself. So therefore, I kind of can go as far as I want. You kind of have to. There's a concept in screenwriting called double mumbo jumbo, where it's basically saying if you have a story with like a vampire in it, that you can't suddenly have aliens show up, because even though we're in a world with vampires, you actually kind of need to like pick your supernatural thing, and a lot of people go with that. You'll see people like move around, like Twilight, has werewolves and vampires, but in general the advice is you want one thing that this is about. I think my challenge in Lucky Day was knowing that absurdity was the monster. I kind of had to think, okay, the way I'm going to avoid double mumbo jumbo is by making it like 20 times mumbo jumbo. It has to conceptually be confetti instead of like two distinct shades of color. It has to be the entire rainbow or it's not going to work. So this was particularly fun because it was kind of a license to say you need to push it way past any lines you've ever really had for that. And if I went halfway, it would just kind of seem awkward. Like, oh, these two things exist. Then you actually read it and you're like, no, everything that these 40 things exist.
But at the same time, though, I didn't look, I've not looked up, but I imagine that a lot of the things that you do talk about in the book about nudge theory and historical inertia, these are all things that exist now, and this is kind of something that kind
Yes.
of grounds everything that you've written in the book. No?
The actual theories and all of this stuff those are all true. Actually, that's all real stuff. And I think that I write a lot of autistic characters because I am autistic, and a lot of these little my characters end up having a lot of little random facts. And it's funny because I rarely have to do that much research because it's just my
Is there?
brain just it's just all there. So a lot of that stuff, especially as someone who, like you mentioned, like just the existential dread, like these thoughts, that's a human thing. Like human beings all have that, but I think there's some people more predisposed to it than
Yeah,
others,
definitely.
and I have so much of them. So all of the stuff, like yeah, historical inertia and nudge theory, just like these are all things that I actually kind of already knew pretty well and were there from the genesis of the book.
Yeah. I mean, I don't obviously don't want to talk too much about the characters either, but the main character Vera in the book, um, she's very much into statistics and probability theories and things like
Yes.
this. So, like, I mean, I imagine a lot of that you said that you kind of you have this done for having all these facts
Yes.
in your head, but a lot of people don't. So, I'm quite curious how you adapt the writing to make sure that everyone enjoys reading things that typically people don't kind of enjoy reading about statistics and probability theories and mathematics and these kind of things.
Yes. You know what is really nice is that I think we have a pretty robust culture of like pop science, which is detrimental in a lot of ways because it does. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. So that would be like, your airport books where there's these really interesting scientific social science concepts and someone goes and writes a book about it where they take all this information and they boil it down into something that someone walking by the store in the airport can pick up and on their flight learn about nudge theory or anything like that. That's actually great because it's important for the masses to understand these scientific
Sure.
concepts, but at the same time, by nature of kind of commodifying it, you're really stripping out a lot of important stuff. And there's a lot of misunderstandings. There's also a lot of you know, just because a study says something, you can go back 20 years later and they try to repeat it and they realize, oh, actually, these studies are way off. Like the amount of times that one of these airport books is directly correcting or refuting one with equal science that came out 5 years before. It's essentially what they're doing all the time. But for someone like me who's writing fiction and interested in these things, if you kind of know how to sort through it, I do think that there is just a plethora of ways that we have developed to talk about these really kind of dense topics in a kind of a fun, interesting way, mostly being metaphor. And then if you extrapolate that, well, okay, if I'm going to use this metaphor, to talk about this concept, that's essentially what a book is. Essentially, Lucky Day is just one big, metaphorical kind of like talking point about this that is essentially, without coming to a conclusion, juggling like historical inertia versus, what a lot of people think of as like the butterfly effect. How much does one little thing you do change, fate versus, versus free will type of things. And it's also kind of a balance between, what I would call like nihilism versus absurdism. And that's not a perfect dichotomy, but I mean, philosophically speaking, a good way to say it would be um, nothing matters, so I'm not going to do anything as one philosophy versus nothing matters, so I'm going to do everything that I can and like live as hard as I can. That's kind of another one of those balances. So it's just these topics boiled down into a metaphor, which is the book.
Hmm. So I'm quite curious. I mean, having written this book, I'm quite curious if you kind of came to any conclusions yourself, or if you something kind of clicked that you didn't really think about previously about kind of in terms of kind of chaos and luck, and if things happen for a reason, or if things are always going to happen for a reason, even if you think it's not going to happen. Was there anything that you kind of you opened your own mind up to through
Oh
writing the
my
book?
gosh, what a great question! What a
It's a
good
loaded
question.
question, but yeah.
No, it's wonderful. It's I think coming into this and anyone who like follows me on social media and stuff, I think my philosophy, I mean, heck, I'm wearing a bag that says love is real across the front of my forehead. It's pretty obvious that I'm a hopeful person who believes in a force of
Yeah.
love. That being said, spiritually speaking or anything, I've been like agnostic my whole life. It's like I could just as easily write I don't know on my forehead. That's just kind of the way that I have gone through things. And I think not just the process of writing this book, but the process of writing all of my horror novels. Um, I think that I have become, for lack of a better term, a more spiritual person, which is not to say religious. And it's also, it's like that's such a loaded thing. But I guess I would say that I have always believed in love being real in a sort of scientific way, if that makes sense. And that the more that I explore that within myself, the more my I don't know turns into a like a I don't really know, but you know what? I'm okay with kind of leaning towards love as a force in a way that I cannot ever maybe scientifically understand it because I've already laid the groundwork where I'm like, I can scientifically understand it. I'm there. I'm happy with it. If that's all I ever get, I'm fine. And now I get to kind of sit here and lounge around and I start to notice these little fireflies more than I did before that are very beautiful and intriguing to me. And so I am not like fully tipped to one side or the other, but I will say that sitting in this and like basking in it while writing has made me really notice those little sparks more where I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of see it.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. No, I mean, that's what the reason I ask is because reading through the book, it really, like I said, it's there's certain kind of ideas that you just can't get your head around. And
Yes.
it didn't help me reach a conclusion, but it kind of helped me open certain doors that I've not been able to open before about things that
There you
I've
go.
really thought about. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And I would hope what I kind of hope with it is that it's not really about a conclusion, which I think
Yeah.
it does a pretty good job of that, you know, I there's a lot of art, and I would say maybe what separates this from like full on spirituality is that there's a lot of stories culturally that are going to tell you, hey, it seems like everything is chaos, but here's order. And this is why it's okay. And I kind of feel like the line that I tried to hit was here's a bunch of chaos and guess what? It is chaotic. But ultimately that doesn't matter. Like hope and love can still exist without order. It kind of doesn't need to, I don't need to prove, like, actually, guess what? There's this one answer to everything. I find it to be a lot more powerful to just say, guess what? That feeling you have of everything being crazy and not making any sense, that's true. But also, love can also be real and hope can be real, and we can still like find beauty in all this chaos. We don't have to
Yeah.
deny the chaos to find beauty.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of, yeah, it's, it just kind of, it teaches you, it's almost like a motivational book in a way, and it helps you to kind of embrace the chaos because like the journey that the Vera does go through in the book is at the beginning, we feel that she does embrace kind of chaos and these theories. Then she loses it all, and then it comes back again through all of these different things that she goes through during the book, and it kind of helps you to kind of appreciate kind of that. Yeah, like you said, things are
Yes.
completely chaotic, but we are able to embrace it and just kind of get through it the best we can. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Brilliant. So listen, just before I let you go, then I want, like I said before, I want to talk a little bit about these other books that you non-stop writing.
Oh,
And
yes.
so obviously, like I said, I'm a pure horror fan, but I also I think I'm pretty sure that I'll appreciate the other books that you've written because of the style that you write. So I'm quite
Uh,
curious, what would you say to someone who's never read these Tinglers? Um,
okay. Yes.
what, for example, someone who's kind of into horror but they've never read your Tinglers, how would you kind of pitch those? How would you sell those? And which one would you suggest that would be best to kind of maybe to try first to get into
So,
those
yeah,
stories?
I think it's interesting because I don't necessarily know if it will trans they are different. I think that the thread between the two and with all the art that I create is that, you know, I am wearing this mask and there's all these theories about who's under here. But one thing
Yeah.
I can say is that um I I do approach writing as an outsider. And because of that, I kind of came to it and there were all these rules and I just kind of pick and choose the ones I like. So I think inherently, like I said, there's a bit of like a punk aesthetic to that of just kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to choose to follow this or not. I think in writing, you know, you tend to find they're very strict about the things that you can and can't do in writing. Where, to use our punk metaphor, in music, if you play a little too fast and it's a little out of tune and it's kind of sloppy and everything, people just say, "Oh, that's the best punk song I've ever heard." That's a great punk song. You do that in writing and you say, "Okay, it was written a little fast, it's a little sloppy, there's some spelling errors here and there." People say, "That's a bad book. That's wrong. It's incorrect. There's no space for it." So the point of the Tinglers, honestly, is, I think people get it wrong. It's not to be bad at all, because there's kind of this like weird fiction kind of like so bad it's good kind of thing. That's not at all what it is. But it is intending to be seizing the moment. It's intentionally sloppy. It's intentionally punk. And so I think anyone that can kind of see that body of work in that context of like, okay, this is just going to be this strange little artifact, one of hundreds that are not just the book itself, but like what it represents, what it represents to have 400 of these books as a larger art project. I think anyone who can resonate with that will appreciate the Tinglers, because that's kind of the thing that they do. And then as far as the first one to read, I mean, there's like 400 of them. So just pick one and see if it's for you or not. And I would just say, if someone reads it and they react to it and they have a reaction that is unlike what they expect, like, they think it's funny, arousing, whatever. That's kind of the point. There is no wrong way to react to them. I would just say the only thing that it's not really is like a traditional reading experience.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Well, that's not what I want either. I want something different. That's
There you
why
go.
I love your horror books so much as well, though. So yeah.
Yes.
At the same time, I mean, you said that there's like 400 books
Yes.
out there, stories out there, no? But I mean, if there's so many, you must enjoy this so much to keep doing it. So what is it about those specific stories that keep you coming back, and how do you keep them fresh for you, not for the readers, but for yourself as well, to keep wanting to come back and keep producing these?
So ultimately, I mean, initially, I kind of wrote them for two reasons. One, there was like a kind of a political angle to them, which was, very long ago, you would see conservative politicians say, what's going to happen if we legalize gay marriage? Suddenly, is someone going to marry a tree? Are they going to marry two big feet? Like, are they going to marry their car? And there was always this argument. And I remember always hearing that and thinking, what would be wrong with that? Like, why would that be so bad that someone would marry their car? I'm not going to do it. But what this world that they would paint, yes, this world that they would paint as this sort of dystopia, I always thought, what a utopia they're describing, that everyone is just free to like have this wild sense of love and romance. And so initially, when I started writing them, I thought, I just want to write all of these books where we kind of set them in this conservative utopia where people can marry Bigfoot or their car or different things, and show that actually that would be a utopia, and that's like, what a beautiful thing. And so that was kind of like I would say the logical genesis, and then kind of the more like philosophical or spiritual part of it. I do find, that like sexuality in art is, people throw around the term like sexual fantasy all the time. We all know what that means. And generally, when you think about what someone would say, that it's not super fantastical. There's not a lot of art like tackling the sort of like outer limits of this one kind of taboo thing of like, why not write this story of this like fantastical encounter in this strange way? So I just kind of have always loved like erotica and erotic art in the exact same way that I've always loved horror, which is that you have this taboo. With horror, it's like violence, right? And like bodily harm and fear. And then with erotica, it's like sexuality and stuff. These are the things that kind of the powers that be have said, hey, you're not allowed to talk about that. Okay. These are taboo. You can't explore that. But I find there's like so much meat on that bone. It's such an exciting place to make art because you have these new tools that are just like bam, you're doing horror, and suddenly it's just like extreme violence or this extreme thing, or like erotica, bam, suddenly you have this like sexuality, these taboos, these like explicit things. I have just always loved to play there, and I really think there's a dichotomy there that like they're two sides of the same coin, to be honest.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't wait to try it. I'm going to dive in and try one of those, and I'll let you know what I think
That's
about
great.
it. Brilliant. So just before I go, then obviously, most writers have always got something on the go. You especially with all of these different Tinglers and the horror movies, the horror books going on at the moment. Is there anything in terms of horror that you're working on or that you have worked on that you can share at the moment that we'll see coming out soon?
Yeah. So I mean, I write pretty far ahead of time. My books, like, it's funny because Bury Your Gaze has a lot of like topical things that everyone's like, oh gosh, this is very of the moment, and they don't realize, I wrote it 2 years before, and then it takes an hour to, come out, and they happen to land just right. And so the book after Lucky Day is called Fabulous Bodies, and it is it's like about Palm Springs. It's a really fun, I would say it tackles like influencer culture a little bit and fame. I kind of you know what it was is I kind of realized that a lot of my books, the real villain behind the monster, it's like the real villain is capitalism. It's always money in a lot of my books, and I thought I can't write another one where the real villain is capitalism. And so I thought, well, what's the other force of that? What's the other side of money? It's fame. So I would say that Fabulous Bodies is like my fame book. I have this trilogy of the capitalism books, and I'm gonna do my fame book. So that's the one that's coming up. That'll be next year, but this year it's a Lucky Day. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time, Chuck. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate
Oh
the
my
book.
gosh.
I've loved the book to bits. I can't wait for people to read it so I can speak to them about it as well.
Oh my
And
gosh, you're so kind. And this was wonderful. I mean, I do these interviews, but your questions and everything, like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was wonderful. I can't say enough how much I enjoyed this.
oh, the feeling's mutual. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again next time about the next book as well.
Yes, please. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Well, thank you so much again, Chuck. Have a great day, and I'll
Thank you.
speak to you again
Yes.
sometime soon. Take care.
Okay,
All the very
bye-bye.
best. Cheers now.
And there you have it, a glimpse into the absurd terror of Lucky Day. Thanks to Chuck Tingle for joining us and spinning a story where luck is anything but lucky, and the improbable might just be our undoing. To you, dear listener, keep your wits sharp, your odds in your favor, and your mind open to the unexpected. This is Bartholomew Butterworth signing off until next time when the weird and wonderful collide once again.